Hi, I'm Mark Frizzell. Thanks for joining me. I want to talk about how you can have a better team by Friday. If that sounds preposterous, it probably is. What I really want to talk to you about is identifying your core leadership principles, because as you grow and change as a leader, so will your team. That's how you'll have a better team by Friday. I came up with the title because I had a coaching client this week who told me a story. She said, I've been listening to one of your live streams about building a more productive team, about building a superpower team, I call it. And she said, as I was listening to you, she said, I started to smirk and smile. She said, it dawned on me what you're doing. And then she told me about Dr. Phil's book, How to Have a Better Husband by Friday. And it's a catchy title, but on the first page of the book, Dr. Phil says, actually, you can't change anyone. The only one you can change is yourself. So if you want a new relationship, a different relationship, then you need to change yourself. You can't actually have a better husband by Friday. So we joked about that. We laughed about that story. And she said, that's what dawned on me, what you were doing with us. While you were telling us how to change our team and get a more productive team, what you were really doing is telling us how we needed to be different and show up differently as a leader and how that would impact our team. She said, I had to smile to myself because I figured out what you were really doing. And that is what I'm doing, is I want to impact your team through you. I have been on a lot of teams. Some teams were great and some teams were not so great. And I noticed that the common denominator in all of those instances was the direct correlation to how strong or weak the leader was. So how that leader operated and treated us as team members affected our team. And then I also learned as a leader, and I've been leading teams for over 25 years, that I have a direct impact on my team, that the way I show up affects my people, affects their productivity, affects their mood, affects their outlook, affects their level of inspiration, their level of engagement. It affects everything about them. And I'm not responsible for everything, but I certainly impact the team. And so this is what I want to talk to you about today, is taking a look at your own leadership and your own leadership principles in particular, and how does that impact your team? Because my life's work is to help leaders lead. I want to impact people. And the best way that I can impact team members is through their leader. When you think about, we spend so much time in our work situations, and we usually work on teams, and we spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week working. And I want to make that as valuable as possible, because I know what it's like to work long hours, many hours of the day, extra overtime. And I've been in good and bad situations, as I've said. And it matters. And so it matters for your people. Their quality of life, their quality of work, their level of productivity, their level of engagement, their level of happiness. And so all of those things matter to them. And so how can I impact them? Well, if I can work with you and I can help you become the best leader that you can be, you will automatically impact their lives. You'll impact their work. You'll impact the results that you get. So that's how I can make my impact, is by working with you and helping you be the best leader you can be to improve the performance of your team and ultimately the lives of your team. I believe that you as a leader have a higher calling. Your job is to do your work through others. Your job is no longer just your own work, but your job now is to work through your team and do your work through them to get results through other people. And there's a book out that says, what got you here won't get you there. And what it means is, what got you to this position of leadership, whether it's your technical expertise, your results, any of the things that got you noticed and got you here, actually won't completely serve you now. So, you're in this position because you got noticed in your previous position. You got noticed for your level of work, for your output, for your results, for your capabilities, for your competencies, all those things. And that got you noticed. And your organization said, your leader said, hey, I want more of that. I want more of that secret sauce that this person has. So why don't I make him the leader of the team? And then everyone else can learn the same way. They'll have the same level of output. They'll have the same performance. The problem is they're completely different skills. You as an individual contributor had much different skills, and you're only responsible for yourself. Whereas now as a leader, you need a different set of skills because you are responsible for the performance and the behavior of others. And that's different. That's a different set of skills. So you have to do your work through others. You have to make an impact on others. And that's what, through these series of videos I'm teaching, is how you can increase your impact on other people. And it's by the way that you think, it's the things that you believe, it's the things that you do, and the way that you act, and the way that you relate to your team. So I want to share that with you. A lot of the principles that I share come out of my book, Superpower, Release the Potential in Your Team. So I do encourage you to pick up a copy of the book. There is a link below, and in it, it's about building your superpower team, but ultimately it's about you and how you show up as a leader. And I talk in particular about the 4 roles that you have as a leader and the 4 gifts that you have to give your team. Because as a leader, you take on a number of new roles that you've never taken before. I believe that you're a shepherd. You're there to care for and lead your people. I believe that you are a manager. There are organizational things that you need to do. You need to budget and plan and do performance review and schedule and the like. Those are management activities. You're a caretaker. You take on a level of responsibility for the emotional well-being and the psychological well-being of your people. You're an organizer. You're there to make sure all of the pieces are in place and are fitting together in order to complete your puzzle. And you're there to make sure everyone understands their work and can do their work and their work fits together. You're also a promoter. You're here to promote the mission of the team, the values of the organization, the goals of the organization, and get results. So there's a lot of new roles for you to do that you didn't have to do as an individual contributor, but you need to do now as a leader. You have no choice. You're in the role. And I believe that there are ultimately 4 roles of a leader. The first is to inspire your team. And I talk about this in the book. You're ultimately there to inspire your team, connect them to a mission, get them focused on a purpose, get them excited about it, and get them to want to join you. I say, you're not a leader unless you have followers. So you need to be able to connect your people to what it is that you're trying to do. You need to inspire them. Second is you need to you need to engage them rather. So first you need to inspire them. Second, you need to engage them. That means you need to connect them and their individual work and their individual abilities to the mission, to the task at hand. And you have to give them good work, clear work. They have to understand what it is that they're supposed to be doing and what their objectives are. So you have to create clarity around the work plan. So that's the strategy and the work plan and their individual contributions. Then you need to support your team. So now you need to get a number of people working together and collaborating. That's no easy task. These aren't individual people working, side by side as if they were planting rows of strawberries in a field. They're actually working together. And productivity comes from multiplication, from when we combine our efforts. So your job as a leader is to support them to execute together, remove roadblocks, find efficiencies, remove barriers, and get them working, talking, collaborating together. Support them through processes, through tools and resources and relationships. That's a big job. And your 4th role as a leader is to grow your team. That means you need to have good metrics to know when you're winning. You need to be able to create conversation around that winning, and you need to be able to grow your people and your team to do even more. So those are your 4 roles: inspire, engage, support, and grow. That's my Power Team Compass. You can see more of it in the book rather. But what I want you to talk about with you today is the starting point. The very starting point of you as a leader and the impact that you have on a team. And you might not think that you have that much of an impact. So let me share a bit of an example. Let's say that there's a high-performing team and the team is functioning very well. They're the best team in the company. They get the best results. Whatever department it is, everybody knows this is a great team. And they lose their leader, probably because their leader gets promoted. So they're without a leader. Maybe there's a vacancy for a while, or maybe a new leader comes in that just isn't as inspirational, isn't a great engager or supporter, doesn't grow the team as well, just isn't as sharp as a leader. So what happens to the team? Well, it doesn't take long before they lose their focus as a team. And as a result, they lose their inspiration. They kind of lose the inspiration of what it is that they can do together. And then they lose their connection of their individual work to what that mission was. And so then they start to disengage and they lose their energy. And then they lack that winning feeling from working together as a team. And then they start to see their results slip. So then they start to lose that winning feeling and they start to lose interest. And it's not long before people start to, leave the team and they join another team. They look for another opportunity. They leave the organization. And soon the results of that team just come back down to average. And people wonder, what happened? What happened to that team? I thought they were great people. They were great people, and they were doing great work. The problem is we changed out the leadership, and we put in a leader that wasn't as strong of a leader as what was there before. So it does come down to leadership. High performing teams do come down to leadership. And I say it starts with you as the leader. In my coaching, I talk to people, my clients, around seeing their leadership as concentric circles, and their team's performance, their whole job really in concentric circles, meaning that the first circle is very small. And in that first circle is just themselves. That's it. That's all that you have. It's just you. And so you as a leader need to get organized. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know what your mission is for your team. You need to get organized and know your strategy and your strategic priorities and your work plan. You need to figure out what your results are, how you're going to measure your progress, all those things. You've got to get yourself organized. And then you can focus on your team, and you can share that with your team, and then get your team working. And then you can move beyond that and then start to work with your peer group, maybe other managers and other leaders, and start collaborating with them and their teams. And then you can move to the broader organization. And maybe it's working with your leader, your supervisor, and their level of peers. And then the broader organization. And then maybe your clients and other stakeholders. And they're all concentric circles, but it all starts with you. It all starts with you in the center. And so the more clear you are and the stronger you are in the center, everything will radiate out from there, because it's about impact, and you have an impact. Think of the analogy of taking a pebble, and the pebble is your leadership, and throwing it into a pond. So what happens with the pebble? Well, the pebble sinks to the bottom. What happens with the pond? The ripples come out from where the pebble went in, and the ripples continue out in concentric circles until they lose their strength, and then they fade away. And so when we throw a bigger pebble into the pond, we get bigger ripples, we get bigger waves, and they transfer further out to the edges of the pond. And so that stone, that pebble in the pond, is you and your leadership. And as you strengthen your leadership, as you get stronger and you get more confident and you get more comfortable and you get more astute on how you work with your team, and you get greater clarity and all those things, it's as if your stone is getting bigger, being thrown into the pond. And so you are going to make a bigger wave. So that's what we want to talk about today, is how do you make a bigger wave? And what is at the very core of that center circle, which is you? And to me, I believe that's your key leadership messages. That's your core themes. Those are the things that you say most often. They are the things that make you act, behave, and relate in the way that you do. These are your core principles. And that's what I want to help you identify. Because when you understand your own core principles, that drives all of your actions. And then you can actually start to make an impact on other people. See, I believe you have core principles already. You already have them. And they may be helping you or they may be hindering you. You already have them. Here's the thing about core principles is you have them, you already have them. And you've gained them from beliefs and experiences that you've had in the past. And then the second thing is those core principles will just ooze out of you. You can't contain them. They will impact the way that you act and relate to others. They will also have an impact on your team and their performance. But the third thing about your core principles is you can choose them. You can choose them and you can change them. You can decide what your core principles are, because your actions really do follow your beliefs. And I'm not talking about, beliefs like wishing or hoping. I'm talking about the things that I actually believe about me, about my team, about the people. Those things will affect my actions. So those come right down to my very key core principles, and I'm going to share mine with you. So if you say to me, Mark, I think my team could do more. I think my team could have more, do more, be more, get better results. You know what it really means is I, as a leader, could be different. I could do something different. I could be different. I could show up differently. That doesn't mean that you are responsible for all the actions of your team, but you are the pond and the pebble. You are the starting place. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. When we talk about leadership development, there's a lot of talk out there right now about competencies. and developing competencies. I have some books on my shelves for leadership competencies. I've been in organizational development work for a long time. And I've got books that have lists of competencies for managers and executives. And they're this thick, and there's hundreds of competencies. And when I read them, it's actually pretty discouraging, because I look at them and say, well, I'm great at that, and I'm okay at that, and I really suck at that, and I should do that. And what about that, and that, and that, and that, and that? And it's overwhelming that there's so many competencies. And I could focus on developing a competency like collaboration, or a competency like communication, or a competency like, something else, results focused. And like there's lists and lists and lists of them, but they all kind of become shoulds, things I should do. And a should is just an obligation that hasn't been unfulfilled. It's an unfulfilled obligation. It's something I should do. I know I should do it, but I haven't done it. And it's shame-based. And so just saying, well, there's lots of competencies, I'm just going to develop my competencies as a leader, you're going to spend the rest of your life and you're not even going to get through half of the competencies. Competencies are like DNA. Some of them you have in spades, some of them you're very strong at, some of them you're very weak at, right? I cannot change my DNA. So I can alter my appearance, my appearance comes from my DNA, but I can't fundamentally change my DNA. And it's the same as a leader. There are some of your leadership DNA are your strengths. That's really what you're great at. But some of your leadership DNA is your weaknesses. And you could spend your whole career working on your weaknesses and trying to mitigate your weaknesses to very little effect. But you could also spend your whole time just looking at your strengths and trying to maximize your strengths and forgetting about your weaknesses. Well, you're still going to have your weaknesses. They're still going to be working against you. You need to be working on both. So you need to be able to leverage your strengths, but mitigate your weakness. That means, things that you can delegate out, blind spots that you can be made aware of, accountabilities that you can build in order to have checks and balances in your life. All of that's great, but that is a difficult way to develop as a leader. That's not who you are as a leader. That's what you're trying to be or do. So that's competencies. And I find that not very helpful. Just learning to communicate better is not really that helpful, because there's so many situations and there's so many different ways of communication. Those are competencies. So that's why I'm not a big fan of competencies. The second way, sort of the thinking around leadership development, is techniques. And so, social media is full of these, because our attention span is so short on social media that post after post after post says 3 ways to do this, 4 ways to do this, 5 ways to do this, 10 types of this, 3 things you should remember. And I call them listicles, and they're attractive because they offer us a short-term quick fix solution to a problem. The issue is those are the answers to someone else's problem. And those are someone else's experiences. That's what they've learned to do that works in a certain situation. And you can copy that, you can emulate that, but it's short-lived. And I may forget one of the steps, and then the steps are useless. Or it may only work for a short while, or only in a certain situation, because it's got to apply to that same exact situation. And there's so many lists that I have to remember, top 3s, top 5, top 10s. I can't keep them all in my head. I can't function that way. I can't function trying, focusing on competencies, always trying to be better. And I can't focus on trying to remember listicles and techniques. So that's why I come back to principles. Principles are beliefs that emanate from you. They are beliefs put into action. That's what a principle is. It's a belief that's put into action. It's a belief that I live out in my life. And like I said, I can no more stop that belief from coming out than I could stop the tide in the ocean. That principle is going to live out in my life, because actions follow our beliefs. And so what I think and what I believe, and I put that into action, that's a principle. So, and I'm going to give you my 3 principles. I can't deny them, but I can challenge them and I can change them. I can choose the principles that I want to live with. As we grow older, we get wiser and we learn new things, and our principles change, our perspective changes. So you can choose your key principles, your core principles, but they have to be real for you. And when your principles will affect your results. And when you change your principles, or you refine your principles, or you tap into your true principles, you will start to see the impact in your results. So if you're not getting the results you want, then you can look backwards at yourself. That's point number one, is you look at yourself. And the second is then you look at your principles that you're living out, and maybe that's what's hindering your success. You need to look deep inside and see what it is that you believe. So I want to share with you 3 of my core principles. And then I want to talk to you about how do you figure out what your principles are, and how do you identify your own principles. So I want to share with you 3 of my principles that are related to me and my leadership. All of the work that I teach online is about leadership principles. So there's lots of principles about what you believe in others, and what you believe about work, and how you get work done effectively, and what you believe about communication and collaboration. And you have principles in all of those areas as well. But I want to talk to you about, the principles that you would have for yourself. So these are my principles related to myself, and I'm going to give you 3. And one of the reasons, before I share these with you, is why do we start with you and not your team? Because it's your team that actually needs the results, right? You need to get better results. You need a new team by Friday. Why don't we just work on my team's productivity? As I've said, you impact the people around you, but we need to start with you. I worked in the airline industry for almost a decade. I worked in the in-flight department, which is all the cabin crew in the back end of the aircraft. And so I had over 2,500 flight attendants that reported through my management team up to me. And if you've been on an aircraft, at all, you've heard the safety briefing, which says in the event of an emergency, if the oxygen masks drop down, put on your own mask before assisting others. There's a reason for that. And the reason is, if the aircraft loses pressure, it's called hypoxia, when we run out of oxygen. And you can't survive very long in a state of hypoxia. You can survive maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute. And the problem is, if you're scrambling to get your oxygen masks on your children or your companions, or if you're a guardian of the people that you're looking after, by the time that you do that, you'll pass out. So it makes good sense that you look after yourself first, so that you can help others. It's not so you can be selfish, but it's just so that you are in a condition to help others. So if you are a leader and you're doing your work through others, and you're trying to make ripples in the pond, and you're trying to make an impact, and we need to understand your core principles and how they impact your team, it only makes sense that we start with you. That we start with you and your leadership and your deepest core principles. So let's start there. Here's my 3. The first one is, you have what you have because of you. So you may want to jot these down, but these are mine. You're welcome to adopt them, but you probably have your own. First one is, you have what you have because of you. This is a statement of accountability. This means I have what I have because I am here and I have chosen it. And it doesn't mean I'm to blame for everything. It doesn't mean I'm responsible for everything, but I am in this situation. I need to be present in this situation. So in a work context, in a team context, as a leader, and I've led teams for over 25 years, every team that I had was my team. I am responsible for the team. I'm responsible for the output, the results of the team. So you might say, well, Mark, that's not fair because I just joined my team and this team's a mess. This team needs help. That's why I'm watching these videos. Well, you have what you have, the team, because of you. Because maybe yesterday you signed on to lead the team. So now it's your team. So accept the responsibility for that. Accept responsibility for what is within your circle of influence and get after it. So that's my first principle. I don't shy away. How does that affect my behaviors, that principle, or my actions? Well, I don't blame my team members. I don't shy away from the work, right? I don't blame the poor results on somebody else. We take full accountability and full responsibility. What does that do? What are the rings that does for my team? They will start to see that demonstrated, and then they'll start to emulate that same behavior. We'll start to build accountability in our team. See, I focused on that principle. I didn't focus on a competency of accountability and how do I build accountability. It has to start with me. And so that for me is one of my leadership core principles is accountability. You have what you have because of you. Here's my second one. It's all about you because it's not about you. So I'll say that again. It's all about you because it's not about you. And this is the oxygen mask metaphor, where you need to start with yourself. You need to focus on yourself. You need to focus on your own development. You need to focus on your own strength. You need to focus on your own well-being before you can help anyone else. Because ultimately, it's not about you. It's about your team. It's about those rings that go out from the center of the pond. Those are your people out there that you're impacting. And you're impacting their work environment, you're impacting their productivity, you're impacting their engagement, you're impacting their happiness, all of those things. And that's why I struggle with topics like engagement, because we tend to go to our people and say, what do you need? How can you be more happy at work? Tell me what you want, and I will try and fill it. I think, you know what, if we had stronger leaders, if we had leaders that took a strong sense of accountability, that developed themselves, that had good core principles, that were authentic, that were good leaders, and that followed the 4 rules I talk about in my book, you cannot not have naturally engaged, contributing people. If you want more engagement on your team, you start with you, because it's all about you, because it's not about you. And here's my 3rd principle. Your actions follow your beliefs. And I've already said that a couple times in this video. Your actions will follow your beliefs. You can't help it. What you believe is what will happen. And like I said, I'm not talking about wishing or hoping. I'm talking about what you really believe. What you really believe is true about you. What you believe is true about your people. What you believe is true about your team, about your organization, about your family, about your relationships. What you believe will impact how you act. It will affect how you act. And you can change your beliefs. And like I said, it's not about a new wish or a new hope. A belief comes from some evidence in the past, and it can be a small shred of evidence, but you see something that impacts your belief. So for example, I might be looking at my team members, and they may be a low performing team. I may have a team member who's low performing, but every once in a while I get this little glimpse of greatness. I'm like, oh, that was a good piece of work. Oh, you really stepped up there. Oh, you actually put in some extra effort. Boy, that was actually one quality piece of work. So I know you can do it. So now I believe. I've seen this shred of evidence. So now I believe in what you as an individual team member can do. It will impact my actions of how I act to you, how I act toward you rather, how I relate to you, right? And so my actions will follow my beliefs. So you can challenge your own beliefs, and you actually can restructure your beliefs. That's why I said as we get older, we change our perspective, we change our beliefs, because we've got more history, we've got more experience behind us that impacts our belief. We learn as we grow. So those are my 3 principles. You have what you have because of you. It's all about you because it's not about you, and your actions follow your beliefs. And that impacts the way that I lead. It impacts what I'm doing right now. Is I really believe that leaders can make a big impact. I've seen it in my own life, and I take accountability for my life impacting others. So I want to impact you so you can impact your team, so they can impact your customers and your organization, and on down the road. So I'm going to ask you, what are your core beliefs? And if I was to be specific, could you name 3 core beliefs that you have about your leadership? So not necessarily about your team. We're not there yet. We're still in that inner concentric circle where we're talking about you and your leadership. I want you to think about those. And this week is a great week to do that. So why don't you take this week and think about what are your core beliefs that you have about your leadership, and write them down where you can see them. And then it's okay to cross them out and change them and refine them as you go through the week. Because this is an exercise where you're trying to bring what's unconscious to your consciousness. You're trying to bring it forward so that you think about and you are deliberate. You don't have to think about these things for the rest of your career every day. That's not actually what you need to do. But at some point in your leadership career, you need to bring them to the surface and evaluate them and say, are these the leadership principles that I am going to apply for my leadership journey for the rest of my life? Are these going to be sufficient? And are these going to get me the results that I want? Because if you're not getting the results that you want, then you need to come back to these principles and say something's not right. I'm not taking a certain level of accountability. It's the way that I see myself. It's the way that what I believe about myself and my results, what I believe about my impact, what I believe about my responsibility, what I believe about my accountability, what I believe about my ability to impact others. Those are the areas that I want you to look at. And I want you to write them down. And I want you to pick 3. There's probably lots more, but just start with that. Pick 3. Because what happens is, as we go down this journey together, and I hope you'll continue to watch my videos, these things will sort of settle back down into your subconscious, and that's okay, because you'll start to live them out. They'll just be who you are. And if you're stuck in this call to action, then I would say go ask your team members. Ask them, what are those things that I say all the time? And I might always say, your actions follow your beliefs. So that's probably a core principle. Or what am I known for? Ask them some of those questions, invite them in, and they probably can shed some light and an objective opinion around you and what your core principles are. And then I want you also to watch this week. So see how these show up in your language, in your interactions, in your behavior, right? The things that you talk about, the things that are important to you, where you want to spend your time, what your focus is, what you really want in work and for your team. Those are your core principles. So identify them, write them down, start to define who you are. And like I said, they're inherent in you. They will always leak out. They'll drive your actions and your behaviors, but they can be changed. You can make a decision about what you want your core leadership principles to be. That takes a bit more work. You need to write them down. You need to refer to them, and you need to learn them and practice them. But you can live out the principles that you choose. So that's how you can have a new team by Friday, is start to identify your core principles and ensure that those are the principles that you want to own for the rest of your leadership journey, and start to take ownership of yourself. Be clear on who you are and what you believe. Come back to that center circle in the concentric circles and be crystal clear on who you are as a leader, what you believe as a leader, what you stand for as a leader, what's important to you as a leader. How would you define yourself as a leader? And then you're going to live it. And you've already dropped the pebble in the pond, and the ripples are already starting to roll. And you're already starting to change your team, and your team will be different by Friday. I encourage you to pick up a copy of my book, Superpower, Release the Potential in Your Team. There's much more about this. It's a book written about teams and building a powerful team. But really, as my coaching client smiled and said, I know what you're doing. You're really trying to change us as leaders. And that's what I'm trying to do in the book. Find out your 4 key roles. Learn the 4 gifts that you have to offer your team and how you can develop as a superpower leader by tapping into the potential of your team. And below this video, you'll also see an assessment. If you want to take my free assessment on your team to see if you have a superpower team, it's 16 simple questions. You can use it, and you have the rights to share it with your team and start a good team discussion around how your team can get stronger together. So thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next week. I'm Mark Frizzell.